Welcome to Write Out Loud, Glimmer Globe Theatre's second annual showcase of poetry, short fiction, and nonfiction. Today's stellar lineup of upstate literary talent features 23 new genre-spanning works, many of which have been performed by the authors. Wheatfield with Crows, a poem written and performed by Judith Prest.
Was the wind blowing the wheat into waves while you painted, laying down loud splashes of cornflower, canary, cadmium, punctuated by the angular sharpness of crows in flight? I imagine you under blazing sun, surrounded by wind, wheat, crows calling. Below it all, thoughts like bright shards propel your hand to lay the paint on thick and fast. This art book image does not do you justice, cannot match the electricity of your bold brushstrokes, a pale shadow of your inner world, a faint hint of the energy flowing through eyes and brain, propelling the paintbrush. Wheatfield, blazing light, a scatter of crows, wild sky and wind, all entwined, a premonition. This will not end well.
Driving My Son to School, a poem written and performed by Vicki Wilson.
Driving my son to school. Snow had fallen overnight, just enough to make the grass poking through lawns look like unshaven leg hair. Kids in unfashionable hats and heavy coats walked to school through town. In the back seat, my son, 11, sang to himself, not realizing he was singing. I worry so much about the point of it all. And then there are mornings like this, with snow and melody, and mothers suggesting lovingly in yellow-lit kitchens, dress warm, it's cold outside. And the kids, who never listen to their mothers, do.
I Want to Be, a poem written and read by Betty Salek.
To be. The poem you write when you rise, restless and wakeful, before the glow of dawn illuminates the page. The paper held lightly under your fingertips, eagerly awaiting the stroke of your pen. Every question and all the answers, from simple to profound, that stir your thoughts and tickle your funny bone. Your first draft and your last, your finest poem conjured in the night.
Soon, a piece of short speculative fiction by VJ Bauer, accompanied by a short film produced by the author.
We are geostationary,
young Caitlin said, with eyes as lifeless as a doll's. Nikolai gently rubbed her temples where his implants were taking hold. They were recording everything: ship status, sensory stimuli, even their conversation.
Grandpa?
She said, her eyes returning to normal.
What's geostationary?
He chuckled.
When I was your age, I wanted to know, why is the sky blue?
Her eyes glazed again.
Some atmosphere scatters short wavelengths. Blue is a short wavelength.
Her eyes went back to normal.
Very good,
he said, gently dressing her reddish bangs over the implant incisions.
How did you get so smart?
Sally helps me.
She does she?
Oh, yes,
Caitlin said, mindlessly rubbing the temples of her well-worn doll. She had drawn little circles on the doll's head, similar to the incision points of her own.
She's not just some ordinary doll, you know.
Grandma put a lot of love into it when she made it for you,
He said.
Sally misses her. I do too.
Caitlin said.
Don't be sad. Soon we'll all be together. We'll climb mountains, sail the seas, and fly on the wings of the wind.
Sally too?
Caitlin said.
Sally too.
There was a slight ripple of the deck plates as their ship broke its higher orbit. Children ran from their seats to the aft transparency, watching the system's single star illuminate purple and blue strands in the planet's upper atmosphere. Lightning flashed, clouds glowed bright and dim, in massive spiraling patterns hovering over the continents forming below them.
More, Grandpa, more!
Caitlin said, jumping up and down with excitement as if Nikolai had arranged it all. 2 tones sounded, then 2 more, and the transparency gradually grew opaque as a podium slowly began to rise from the floor of the central stage.
Come,
Nikolai said.
we need to sit. There'll be more to see later.
Shimmering into view stood a tall, slender man in a full-length bodysuit, adorned with a stole of purple and blue.
Dearly beloved,
He began.
we are gathered here at this time and place to pay our final respects to the last of a great generation. We give thanks for all they have done, for all they now give back, for generations to come. As it was in the beginning, it is now and ever shall be.
The congregation responded.
When I call your name, please stand.
He said. Each grandparent stood in turn, with their grandchild of choice beside them. Nikolai counted to himself, periodically looking over his shoulder, estimating those yet to come.
I'm guessing 30, maybe 35.
He said, lacking any preciseness without his implants.
There's 49.
And Caitlin said, her eyes once again glazed.
22 in the theater. The rest passed in transit. Their pods have already dropped. North Atlantic Pool, East Coast.
Her eyes returned to normal. In that brief moment, he saw himself reciting things to his grandfather that he didn't understand at the time, but understood now. Full circle he had come. Every thought, every accomplishment, every voice of his ancestral line would be Caitlin's now. Soon he'd join his grandfather, his beloved, his son.
From earth we came, and to earth we shall return,
He said, holding back an urge to cry. Caitlin hugged him.
Nikolai Ivanko,
The deacon called out. He stood, clutching Caitlin at his side.
we acknowledge your contribution and the one you have chosen.
The observation theater broke out in applause.
Is this a good thing, Grandpa?
A good thing, yes.
I'm happy then, Grandpa.
Me too.
Go in peace to love and serve.
The deacon concluded as he shimmered out of view and his podium retracted back into the floor. Behind him, steps to the lower hangar were revealed, and people collected their belongings and began moving in that direction. When Nikolai stepped forward, Caitlin tugged him back.
I don't want you to go.
She said,
Sally doesn't want you to go either. She says there are treatments. I like treats. I like mints. Don't you?
I do.
he said.
I do. But I've had way too many. Sometimes more is not a good thing. Sometimes too many treats will...
Rot your teeth.
She completed his thought.
Yes.
He said,
Better for me to rest. It's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing of life eternal. Do you understand?
Ashes to ashes.
she said.
Dust to dust.
Yes, but with so much more in between. Soon a wellspring of memories and stories of all that I am and all I've become will rise up to warm you in the light, comfort you in the dark, and I will always be with you.
Grandma too?
She said.
Yes, Grandma too.
She hugged him all the more.
Come,
he said, standing and taking her by the hand.
let's go to the hangar. You can watch as I launch.
Caitlin stood as one of the last of the children to leave the hangar, lingering just long enough to watch her ancestral planet recede against the backdrop of stars. She pushed her thoughts past the analysis and telemetry, the ship wing stresses and thrust vectors that she understood now with clarity and maturity beyond her years. There would be a time when she'd return. She knew that now. All her tears would be tears of joy. Grandpa would be waiting. Grandma, too.
Soon.
She said.
Soon.
Makerspace, a poem by Rhonda Rosenheck, read by Danielle Henrici.
I work in a makerspace in an old industrial town on the Hudson River. The highway leading here runs up the river's west bank through a different city, more important. Look east at the weeping sand pile, jobless crane and shuttered party boat. Droopy chain-link fence beckons, psst, over here. And university bricks beam up from the backdrop hill. Winding streets trickle to town from up those hills where peeling Georgians with rickety stairs ascending steep lawns were built well once for mill owners' wives. Corner of 3rd and Broadway. I sit beyond the honor guard of arched windows, behind which GVS Quackenbush sold the muslin and thread. I am a writer, an editor, a poet, surrounded by engineers and designers, by former military entrepreneurs and video game zombies working hard. This whole town was a makerspace. Calloused millers and needle-pricked stitchers, some havoc-wreakers whose children inherited the role, the chain-link fences, but not the jobs. I did not grow up here, return or go to school here. The old industrial buildings drew me, their bones, not their ghosts.
"13, Parts 1 and 2, a poem by Wendy Everard.
13, Part 1. She huddles in her nest both day and night. Content, it seems, but somehow just as blue. Her wings bedewed, too heavy to take flight. Her world is upside down, too wrong to right. This heaviness uncovers something new, and in her eyes, a darkness now alights. Unasked for answers, more alarm than fright, and resignation settle in as true. Her eyes, they're grim, her mouth a line set tight. I watch in fear. She's lost the will to fight. Another's robbed her of herself, but who? And in her eyes, a darkness now alights. I pray a turnabout from wrong to right, though innocence I know has bid adieu. Her eyes, they're grim, her mouth a line set tight. She teeters on the line, twixt black and white, a creature both unknowable and new. And in her eyes a darkness now alights. Her eyes they're grim, her mouth a line set tight. Part 2. But stars that guide a vessel keep it true. And in her eyes there often shines a light, yet undeterred by winds that blow askew. Arises then the girl that I once knew, a rose undamaged by the threat of blight, youth and beauty kindled now anew. Wit and wisdom from her lips issue, and lies within her unexpected fight, a creature both unknowable and new. This strange, sad bird surprises me, it's true. Within her lies a steady second sight, youth and beauty kindled now anew. The lightness of her laugh can then undo the iron will and clamped lip so tight, a creature both unknowable and new. Seen by her, I'm forced to see her too. She lifts aside her veil of seeming night, youth and beauty kindled now anew, a creature both unknowable and new.
If I Said I Hated You, a poem written and read by M. Pastor.
If I said I hated you, that would be a lie. I don't hate you. I hate the way you make me feel. I hate the way I was stupid enough to give you all of my love. But no, I don't hate you. I could never hate you. Even after you gave away your love to someone who wasn't me, even after you spoke sweet nothings into the ear of another, even after you blew a gaping hole into my chest that feels as though it'll never be repaired. No, I don't hate you. More than that, I'm stupid enough to be in love with you still. I still love you. I envy your shirt for being able to touch your soft skin. I think of how fortunate any passerby would be to hear the soft sound of your laugh. But it makes me sick thinking of all the women who were able to feel the same love you gave me without my knowledge. My stomach churns with the thought that my love was never enough for you, my bountiful amounts of love. But if I had to live a loveless life just to be in your presence for even a fleeting moment, I would. I'll live as a hollow being if it meant I could feel the warmth of your touch again and again.
The Fun in My Head, a poem written and read by Tom Morgan.
The fun in my head. Give me a fire that roars like a beast, that pours out a blast oven's heat. No gas flames that whimper, no coals steeped to glimmer. Good glimpse of hell can't be beat. I love a dog that leaps onto your chest, that lunges and hauls you off on its romps. No breeds that love yipping and need quaffing and clipping. It's the lurchers, the hounds that are trumps. I yearn for books that claw at your heart, that whipsaw you through all of their pages. I've no time for effete stuff, in and discreet fluff. Now give me sagas that cavort through the ages. The host pinches asses, ever refills the glasses. Now that's what I love in a party. It's divine Chardonnay, a dab of pâté, stuff that. In files marked arty-farty. Hoist me a drink that explodes in your gullet, that sandblasts you, ears, nose, and eye sockets. You can toilet that claret. Bubbly flute, I can't bear it. I want booze coursing in like a rocket. Give me storms. I love those that crack branches and whump-thump the night at my door. Fine days, fair breezes, not for wusses. Bring sneezes, better gales that scream out, this is war. Big storms I'm talking, that flail, drench, and hail you. flatten the trees on the hills. Fine days are nice, but for me, sleet and ice and tempests that topple windmills. Heap me snows to the rafters. Those are gales that I'm after. Drifts as high as the old house was built. No puny snow squalls, but storms that show balls and smother my house like a quilt. Give me nights in the tap room. Here's a fight, bar keeps tight. Those guys that sniff and peg, they'll need hosing. Keep tete-a-tetes to yourself. Gentle chats on the shelf. I want puke in the pisser at closing. As for food, I love steak. Worship ribs and rich gravy. Sausage, bacon, chips won't go wasted. Soy, yogurt, snap peas, salmon fresh from the North Sea. That's the worst tripe a man's ever tasted. Now poems, and we're in one, must pummel, move you. No porridge that tiptoes around life's gristle. Spare me wee odes that waffle. They're insipid and awful. Best are verses that roar down life's trestles. As for loves, serve me steamy, over charmy and dreamy. Let 'em screw me in ways bend in Sodom. They should howl, filled with pleasure, gouge my back for good measure, sop my mind with pure lust, top to bottom. My mind's, now you mention, that's all I got, plus my pension. I'm flaccid in jaws, toes, and crotch. The broads, dogs, booze, I'm afraid they're yesterday's news. And I'm the one who the staff's hired to watch. My jaunts are on paper. I'm not up for a caper. My banquets are pablum and mashed pear. All the fun's in my head. I'm confined to this bed or strapped to that fucking wheelchair. And so fires, hounds, and whiskeys only live in my dreams with the storms, nights on bar stools, the treks up mountains. I hear gossip from nurses and the old fart next door's curses. Boiler shot, only dribs from this fountain.
Old Jock and Old Bob, a story by Bala Jones, performed by Michael Henrici.
Old Jock and Old Bob by Bala Jones. When death came into the cabin, the old dog knew it. The dog tried to spring up to confront this new enemy, but only managed to get shakily to his feet. Though he knew he didn't have the strength to spring into battle, he lowered his head and snarled fiercely, then looked over at the man sitting in the rickety armchair by the dying fire. The man said nothing as Death, which he had always imagined to be a beautiful woman, trailed her soft gray skirts across the cabin floor toward the dog. The dog, seeing her come, growled bravely in her direction. "It's all right," the man said softly. "She won't hurt us, Jock." Jock looked at the man again, and then in the man's imagination, Death gently laid a graceful hand on the dog's shaggy shoulder. Almost in slow motion, the dog slid to the floor, gave a slight shudder, a long, peaceful sigh, and was gone. The man, who most people knew as Old Bob, didn't move for a long time after that, but sat staring at the fire as it shrank to coals and then into ashes. Near dawn, he took tobacco from the old tin on the table by his side and filled up his favorite pipe. As he savored the smoke, he turned from the fire to look out the window while the dawn came up. He always loved watching the pines appear as dark outlines against the first pale sheen of morning light, like soldiers on the hillside guarding his farm, he always thought. Keeping them safe, always there. Finally, he knocked the ashes out of his pipe against the hearth and stood, almost he thought wryly as shakily as the dog. He stood there for a few moments to get his balance, then walked across the cabin to get the tartan blanket, which was folded and ready on the worn sofa. Carefully set on the floor beside old Jock, and after rubbing a quick, gentle hand along the dog's black, silky flank, he wrapped the dog in the colorful fabric covering everything but the dog's head. He found it was unable to cover Jock's head. He had trouble standing up again, but managed it finally. Then with difficulty he bent and picked up the dog. Momentarily he gently balanced Jock's forequarters over his shoulder as he opened the cabin door, stepped out onto the front porch, and firmly pushed the door closed behind him with his heel. Then he cradled the dog in his arms like a child, and with Jock's head on his shoulder, he walked down the steps into the late November morning. It was a pale, gray day, with rags of mist teasing the tops of the hills. The autumn mountain air was sharp and damp, a clammy breeze that fingered his clothes and tugged fretfully at his hair as he slowly walked across the front yard toward the distant pines. The radio had predicted snow with the first blizzard of the season probably to occur before nightfall. There was no probably about it. Bob knew it would snow for sure, and soon. He could smell it. Old Bob paused for a moment and turned back to look at the cabin. He held the dog close as he studied the cabin and the yard, really looked at them as he hadn't done for a long time. His Sarah had made the area in front of the cabin bloom brightly in spring with daffodils and red and white striped tulips. In summer the rose bushes took over. Even now, the autumn asters and mums had managed to struggle into blossom, were still clinging to somewhat desperately to their final faded blooms. He had tried to maintain Sarah's flowers this past summer, but they had seemed to know that she wasn't there anymore, and had slowly failed to thrive. Like me, maybe, he thought. The grass, always mowed as smooth and as flat as he could make it, had the brownish cast of the season. The rose bushes were clipped and wrapped in burlap for the winter. Even though it had a barren and deserted look, the garden seemed cared for. She would be pleased that he had never let it go. She had been so thrilled when he had created the space for her garden. "I want a lawn," she had said. "A real green lawn with a flower garden." So he had attacked the stony, unpromising ground in front of the cabin. God, the work it had taken to do that. But he smiled now into the dog's fur, because it had been worth it. She had loved it, and she had made it more beautiful each year, until she couldn't any more. Though it would have saved her time and footsteps, Sarah never would agree to combine her flower garden with their vegetable patch which lay behind the cabin. Even when she got sick, and moving around became increasingly difficult for her, she tended them separately. He could not see the vegetable patch from here, but he knew it was bare. The last of the pumpkins had been given to the grandkids of friends at Halloween. He couldn't kneel to weed or plant anymore, and his back didn't much like bending. All that would grow there in future were things that would thrive without the help of humans. He thought, for a moment, about the barn behind the vegetable patch. It was empty now, and much neater than when it had been housed 4 cows, 12 chickens, 2 barn cats, 1 barn owl, and a crazy little goat. Animals he had loved. Nothing to tend any more, though, he thought, feeling sad momentarily. There was nothing in life to match the quiet friendship offered by animals, he thought. Old Jock, especially. Abruptly, he turned away from the yard and started firmly up the path through the pines. Earlier in the week he had dug Jock's grave near the top of the hill at a spot where the pines began, a sheltering spot cool in the heat of summer, gently snow-covered in winter, with a view down to the tiny valley that held his cabin and to the mountains beyond. As he climbed, he could smell the pines giving out their evergreen fragrance. He couldn't remember smelling pines outdoors in winter unless it was from the Christmas trees that he and Sarah used to drag in and decorate. On damp autumn days like this, they smelled like midsummer. Once long ago, he and Sarah had finished a picnic, making love on the picnic blanket, and afterwards lay naked, holding hands, looking up through the pine branches. As he continued, uphill, cradling the dog, a crow cawed somewhere above him, and a few scattered flakes of snow whisked by him, then vanished, startlingly white against the unpaved path. "Coming soon, Jock," the man murmured. Big snow for November. He was used to talking to Jock, and forgot, briefly, that Jock probably could no longer hear him. He smiled at his own foolishness. Arriving at the graveside, he put the dog down with careful gentleness next to the tarp covering the newly opened earth. He had left his spade and rake here ready to hand. He removed the tarp, and was relieved to see the earth under it was dry. Then he removed a second tarp from a pile of leaves which he found were also dry, before raking them into the hole to make a soft bed. He remembered, as he placed the warmly wrapped dog into the opening, how Jock had loved to play in the autumn leaves. He picked up the spade, but then stood, for a time, leaning on the long handle, silently looking down at the dog. He didn't pray exactly, having disliked churches all his life, but in the silence he somehow acknowledged the oneness of nature around him and Jock's place in it. Finally, he bent to gently cover the dog's head with the remainder of the blanket. Then, with brisk efficiency, he covered the dog with the earth piled next to the grave. When the look of the grave suited him, he covered it with the remaining dry leaves, folded the tarps neatly, and went up the hill to fetch the log he had prepared for Jock's grave marker. He dug a small, deep hole near Jock's head, and upended the log into it so the words he had carved showed clearly. It had taken him a long time to get the words just right, and even longer to carefully and deeply carve them into the polished log. Old Jock. Loved and faithful. He patted down the earth, making it firm and tight around the log, and then stood back. "That's fine," he said, studying the grave with satisfaction. "That's good." The grave looked unexpectedly warm under the leaves, cozy and tidy. He noticed now that the snow was rapidly becoming a storm. On the mountains behind the cabin, flakes were falling thickly, swirling from a sky suddenly blooming with fat, gray-bellied clouds. This would be a serious snowfall. He leaned his tools carefully against a nearby tree and piled the folded tarps beside them. He took a last pleased look around, then he sat down, awkwardly, on the leaf-strewn grave, and for a time he just watched as the storm approached across the valley. The snow drew closer until it swirled heavily around the cabin below him, misting his view of the mountains on the other side of the small valley below. Eventually he saw that the heavy snow was slowly climbing toward where he sat. So he turned on his side and lay down on the snow-speckled leafy grave. He put his arms around old Jock's marker, and with a weary sigh, which held absolutely no regret, he closed his eyes and prepared himself for sleep.
Snake Plant, a poem written and read by Roger Hecht.
Snake plant. That potted snake plant looks nothing like a snake. It's a wide, flat ribbon that ends in a point. Maybe a snake flattened by traffic on some desert road. But no snake I know sticks head first in the dirt like a signpost. Though I've seen one slip quickly down a hole between two rocks in my garden. And no snake I know of is so cardboard stiff or pale green or white rimmed, though I've seen deep, dark green snakes with yellow racing stripes. And wouldn't it be cool to see a snake racing in helmet and goggles, buckled into a Formula One, tongue flick for a thumbs up, tear around the track, because snakes are fast, a wrinkle in the grass, but often they freeze when cautious. The snake that bit my daughter's foot, none too pleased to be nearly stepped on, stood its ground long enough for a cell phone selfie, which is how they determined it wasn't a rattler. Though I didn't know that at the time, racing across half of Pennsylvania in the pre-dawn night with the only best-case scenario I could think of. She'll only lose her foot that had inflated to almost twice its size, each hour's swelling marked with a paramedic Sharpie, a topomap of toxins. But it was a copperhead's bite, and so that was the worst of it. And by the time I arrived at the hospital, the antivenin, freshly flown in from the zoo, had begun to cull the swell. So hooray for modern medicine, and for hospitals that write off exotic expenses, and for the taxpayers that absorb the cost, and for the snake that gave my daughter a reputation for toughness she carried the rest of the school year, and a story that's good for a lifetime. That snake that lay like a dark ribbon in the rocky shadows, though nothing like a snake plant, which looks more like green lasagna when you think about it.
Esther Williams, written by Mageen R. Mulholland, read by Danielle Henrici.
Summers after my father died, we'd call my mother Esther, the way she would glide through the water, rolling from shoulder to shoulder, her arms poised in the air like sparkling wands, performing the backstroke as graceful as a movie star. Her fingertips and flutter kick created ripples as she swam, the sun catching the glimmer of the waves that encircled her, holding her up like a brilliant supporting cast, changing into any formation at her every whim. She wore her swim cap like a kind of crown, the moist, supple colored flowers falling over her ear or brow, so she'd appear as my glossy heroine, saturated with all the glamour her child's eyes could hold. Like a Hollywood marathon, scenes from Easy to Love or Pagan Love Song, she did not emerge from the pool all season. We'd wake to find her there, repeatedly immersing herself first in the tepid shallows before plunging by afternoon far into the deep end and eventually resurfacing, sustaining herself all evening in a back float, face up, looking toward the heavens, as if imagining his way of life there. Weightless.
Kaleidoscope Eyes, written and read by Terry Rainey.
Kaleidoscope Eyes. With your erect posture, headphones hugging your ears, you look perfect, so tranquil. You strum a few chords of air guitar. Maybe you're listening to the Beatles playlist I made. I gaze at the clock, wish it would stop, that I could extend this moment, watching you at peace. In twilight, water faintly murmuring around your waders, you face the setting sun. Its rays catch you just right. So handsome. A lucky man, you said, beloved by all. I can hear little wavelets lap the dock as I re-clean the dinner dishes. You'd used laundry detergent instead of dishwasher liquid. I scrub its gritty detritus off plates and bowls. In the living room, your grandsons, George and Paul, quietly read. As the tide slithers in, I make sure the strawberry-colored lines I drew on your waders are visible, relieved to see you still have time till the water touches red and reminds you to walk back to shore. This afternoon on the porch, you turned to me and said, I know what it is to be sad. I'd stayed silent, trying to find the right words, till I remembered that that was a line from She Said, She Said. So I didn't respond. After a moment, you went on. When I was a boy, but you stopped. Bewilderment overwhelmed you. You put a finger to your lips, searching for the question you wanted to ask. Where's Johnny? He's gone. You know that. I was caught off guard. Well, when is he getting back? Impatience fueled your frustration. Not wanting to upset you more, I told you he'd be here in a while, suggested a nap might be a good idea. I waited until you closed the bedroom door before allowing myself to think about Johnny, the ache welling up anew, as it always does. To ease the bittersweet reminders, I turned my thoughts to Paul and George, appreciative of the tangible blessing of their presence, and glad for their obliviousness of your disconcerting drift, your mind abruptly going from lucid to confused. It follows no timetable. It drains me, makes me savor the sight of you here with us even more. But, like fine chocolates or a spring peeper chorus, I know it won't last. Tonight, at dinner, upset about Paul's interruptions, you'd corrected him. But you called him George, confusing all of us. Angry about our puzzlement, you jumped up, cleared the table even though we weren't finished, loaded the dishwasher, and huffed out of the cabin. The boys sensed my concern, but thankfully they didn't ask questions. They're quiet now. I find both asleep on the couch. I cover them in blankets, give them each a hug. I linger, aware of the ebb and flow of their breath, grateful. Back in the kitchen, I look outside. The sky is deepening. Day's end hovers. You are nowhere to be seen. I am shocked at how panicked I become, searching out the window and not seeing you, forgetting the boys. I rush out to the porch, grabbing the binoculars as I try not to scream aloud. My heart races till I find you at the far end of the cove. How did you get so far down the beach? I dash all the way to you, cursing myself for not paying more attention when you told me you knew you were ready to leave. Must have been the song that tripped your wandering mind. Mention of Johnny should have tipped me off. I never know what state you're going to be in from one moment to the next. Cooperative, angry, belligerent, placid. It's a mystery where your mind takes you. My heart thumps during the walk back. I don't stop jittering until I get you settled on the front porch. You seem fine, no risk of the water taking you away. I try to remain calm. You seem utterly serene now. Wish I could leave you alone here on the porch, let you enjoy the sounds of the evening. But I have the boys inside, and I can't take the risk. Come on, Dad. Let's go in the cabin. The boys are ready for a story before bed. Such a sparkle in those blue eyes. You're going to joke about staying up to watch the sunrise like you used to, aren't you? No, the light's gone now. Oh, all right, Eleanor. No, Dad, it's me, Michelle. Oh, how I hate seeing confusion mar your features. Maybe I should allow this regression to pass. You nodded off for a bit. Time to wash up and settle in. Still a shock to me, your aging, along with my unceasing need for your approval, trying to meet your stern standards. Knowing of your incredible achievements as both an academic and an athlete, I don't know what's worse, the wandering mind or the lucid snatches, the bits and pieces you remember but can't understand how to fit together. As though you're swimming in the ocean and suddenly forgot your strokes. While I stand at the shore holding my breath, unable to save you, watching you sink, realizing you're unaware that you may be drowning. Maybe it's better this way. For a second, I hate myself for thinking that. You plop yourself onto the couch between the boys, wake them up good-naturedly, suggest we knock out a few tunes. Oh my gosh, I've got goosebumps. Singing together, just as we did as kids. Picture yourself in a boat on a river, your beautiful tenor, so strong. With tangerine trees, Paul's voice so much like Johnny's. When did you teach them this song? What a showman you still are. Leaning toward George, crooking a finger toward him. My precious George chirps, and marmalade skies. The boys' faces tilted toward you, their grandfather. Your pale eyes reflect the light from the kitchen. You're the conductor at the rostrum, and we are the esteemed choir. It's my turn now. Yes, here it comes. Unsure that I can get the words out, I swallow. You put your finger to your lips, slowly swing your arm in a wide arc toward me, then whisper, the girl with kaleidoscope eyes. My delivery is impeccable, as it has been on hundreds of occasions. Why did the words stick in my mouth this time? I feel like sobbing, but don't want the boys to see me cry. I force myself to join in the refrain, Lucy in the sky with diamonds. I fade away from my family toward the fireplace. The mantel displays some of your most precious prizes. The golf ball you used to win the club championship. The baseball I snagged at a Little Falls Mets game. Your Mr. BS flag mounted on a pile of plastic poop. And the father-son tournament trophy you and Johnny brought home. I'd ridiculed all these relics through the years. I hated dusting them. But I'll claim them when my sister and I split up the remnants of your empire. It's not one marked by riches or possessions. It's what you quietly did for all of us. The graceful way you've handled yourself in both the happiest and the most grievous times, loving us constantly, opening our eyes to the beautiful, leading us in singing. Your pure voice floats out the window into the quiet night, leaves us gradually, unbearably, beautifully.
Burning Embers, Ode to Evening at the Tavern and Candlelight Evening, a poem by Claire L. Wetteman.
History will stand still for you and for me as we live, and the world will turn for us as we watch our little dramas unfold once more. So sweetly, so intensely, so fervently in this place. You light the candle and pour cider for waiting guests. I play the music. The strings tremble out their vibrant melody. The fire burns even until lasting embers glow. A choir sings and brass instruments are blown. An organ pumps out its reedy tune. Cheeks feel frosty air. Bustling folks come and go. And then all is still. And like those we remember, we live no more. Anew, all is silent, while gently drifts to the ground the freshly falling snow.
The Performance Review by Rachel Risberger, a short scene featuring performances by the author and Karen Butler.
Now, we are here for your annual performance review?
Yes, yes.
Now, you have been with us for how long?
Oh, well, this is my second review, so a little over 2 years now.
I see. Tell me, would you describe your job for me, what you do?
Oh, certainly. I see 47 pediatric clients regularly, and I do the evaluations and intakes as needed. Those have been averaging about 2 per week lately. I supervise the other 2 therapists in the program, each seeing 35 clients. Oh, sorry. They each see 35 clients per week, and I do supervisory co-visits with each of those clients on a monthly basis. Yeah.
Well, I see that your census is averaging 95%.
Yes, I'm very sorry about that. You see, I have to compete with things like holidays and conference days and absences, assemblies, field trips, state tests. I try very hard to see each of the children as often as is mandated, but sometimes the circumstances are just beyond my control.
Oh, I see.
Well, I hope you will note the 5-star satisfaction rating that all of the families I work with have given me.
Oh, yes, that has been duly noted.
Thank you.
Now, the other directors and I have been discussing your performance, and we think that some changes should be made.
Oh?
In your workload.
Oh?
So we have decided to put you in charge of the Sunshine Manor program.
The adult program?
Yes.
Oh, but I'm specialized in pediatrics.
I'm aware of that.
Well, are you taking me out of the pediatrics program?
No. We need you in pediatrics. You will be taking on the Sunshine Manor in addition to your current placement.
Oh.
Now, yes, you will be responsible for supervising an additional 3 therapists at Sunshine Manor. 1/3 of their caseload will be added to your roster, and you will maintain all of your current duties.
Is this considered a promotion?
Of sorts. You can add Sunshine Manor Therapist Supervisor to your email account on your signature line.
Will these additional duties be reflected in my paycheck?
Now, they will be reflected in your paycheck in that you will continue to receive a paycheck.
I don't think I understand.
Well, let me explain it to you. Your current workload is double that of any of the other 18 therapists we have working for us. Yet you maintain a 95% census when it comes to making sure your clients get the therapy services they deserve. Now, all the other therapists are performing in the 60-65% range, and all of the other therapists have maintained a reasonable 3-star approval rating as compared to your 5-star rating. Now, to put it simply, you are making everyone else look bad.
What?
Oh, we can't say that 18 out of our 19 therapists are all underperforming. Well, that's not possible. Now, the only explanation is that you are overperforming. So, in an effort to align your performance with the rest of our esteemed staff, we are increasing your workload by 39.2%. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am meeting with the other directors for lunch. And you and I will meet again in about a year. And I really hope that in a year's time, we can come up with a more satisfactory performance review.
Daffodils, a poem by Diana Steenberg.
This is a poem called Daffodils. You asked me if I ever stole anything. I lied. I'm sorry. Here is a story I can't tell because I'm the hero and the villain, a crime done over twice. I was 7, even more feral, if you can imagine. It helps to say she had a lot of them, yellow, nodding, and that she liked me, and that she'd like this end. Betty Van Ostitz with a bright red wig, Betty of ladies' luncheons, pate and crackers, Betty walking Buster down the lane on a leash, Buster, the black and white, but Betty had another cat named Love. Betty, frumpy and fascinating and 57. Betty with a garden. I don't recall the day I only stole 2 in full flower, 1 for each side of the entrance to the lilac tree I called home, in the empty field I called home. But my crime came back every year, reliably green and growing until there was no one left to see it. I can mark the day last summer. Full pandemic, 47, foraging daffodils at dusk. The street was empty, the field was empty, the lilac had been hit by lightning. The air was lush and green and pink, all black locust and poison underneath. Here, now, back again, buried. The only thing left of Betty, bright at the base of my back door. The short story is, I stole these flowers. The long story is, they bloomed. Apparently, if you take me out to the edge of the end of the world, this is what I save. It's not enough, but may we all be forgiven for our crimes.
An Evening in Brooklyn, a poem written and read by Jane Lawrence.
On a sweltering summer night, head back in a lawn chair, I remarked, not much has changed in the mating dance except the weapons. I saw the black-tooth comb change to a switchblade, the tap of stilettos replaced by the click of a revolver. But the brownstone steps still hold court as the girls flip their shiny black hair and the boys circle around them. The bad girls still laugh out loud at the innuendos, and the good girls still pretend not to hear them, as the boys flex their forearms and check to see if anyone's watching. Through time immemorial, the mating dance has not changed. The world around them has. But in that brief, still moment, the only sound heard is the moths dancing on the lamppost and the licking of the lips.
Glycemic Sweet, a poem written and read by Noah Cusage.
Detritus from a windy night. Out front, the pansies choke on Pepsi bottles, swirling ghosts of Snickers, Swisher Sweets, a popsicle's torn skirt. Out back, a hummingbird exhausts the scarlet runners of their nectar. Can't tell if it's bedlam or heaven here. Baselines and fruit flies hover, disappear. This heavy, summer sleepy excess blears the brain. I know they've mapped the muskrat and the skunk, the Jupiters that lap a billion suns. I still can't figure out sugar. We know what's good for us. Just cut the sweet stuff, per nutritionists, and fogs a decade thick will lift. Reveal a Zion where our brilliant inner beasts pluck fish from rivers. It's true. I'm ruined as anyone by Starburst, Twix, and Skittles, freighted twice by want and weight. and I'd be rid of it for that alone. If not for this infernal compass, birthright by which ants compose a chemical sonata to a single drop of ice cream. Last week's paper, rain rippled and torn. Fifth child dies after Chattanooga crash. How do you hold that? How do you ball it up around the unforgivably mundane gum wrappers, dandelion heads your own sweet daughter tore in frenzy from the lawn? The wheels keep spinning. Cain breaks backs in Cuba, Banks slash burn Jamaica. Is a tongue to blame in Newark for the forkful of tres leches it conveys? Pay my $12 and enter. 3 square rooms, the lighting sober, though it's had a glass of wine. Vents breathe a buffered music. Walls are hung with boxes of the artist's boredom. Line and color, luminal and after image, bodies out of frame that claim to writhe. 35 minutes to the exit. Street returns with candied nuts and acrid smoke, and I recall the fare. Spun bodies, spun sugar, tattooed ticket takers, mucky grounds where no one couldn't not remember life was precious. Vanilla mint, red velvet mousse, the shampoo aisle, a thin patisserie. But in my dreams, I shower with a girl who stinks of cabbage cleft in 4 and boiled. The crosshatch burned into a glistening chop. Butts of Newports, blue moon caps, spent condoms, sun-bleached burger wrappers. Pleasure ages ugly. Lately, the tiniest twinge hangs on each bar of melody. Sours every cloudless noon, as if to suffer would redeem. How's that for a toll? Coffee's gone. But like a bell's clapper, a bee keeps wanting its way through the empty cup.
The Remains, a poem by Gemma Cooper Novak, performed by Danielle Henrici.
I married your fingers twice, 3 times, 4 times, until I could have been shaped entirely by your palms. I bound myself to tailored trousers hanging from your hairpin hips. I held the footprints along trails where you'd had to hide every piece of property under roof and snow. I married you and married you and married you. Kitten, heartbeat, jaguar. How could it possibly ever have stopped? When you were gone and gone and gone and gone, I married you and married you and married you. And then I looked for you, scouring street corners, the bomb shelter door, the train station, the faded scrubland camps ravaged with barbed wire. I embraced you eternally, already. Jaguar, coffee on my tongue. And I looked for you, Even though you were everywhere, you were only real in the dark, under bombs, immaterial, under streetlight streaked stillness. And still I married you, even when I lined my throat with pills like bathroom tile. Even when I married him, you were iridescent in wallpaper, the crook of my thigh, sweet, jaguar, mine. I was yours forever on snow-damp train tracks to the black forest between camps, and with knees on black ash-turned earth, I tried to explain it all to bones, tangled with other bones, under roots and snow, so many other bones. What made me think yours could even hear me?
Small P Poet, a poem written and read by Lori Ruhlman.
I am a small p poet, not like E.E. Cummings, but like a Lincoln log builder is a small a architect, or a meditator might dabble in small s spirituality. I am a small p poet because I follow no rules, I create no rhymes, and I send out no submissions. I borrow words to reach beneath the surface, to make sense of the world, to purge anger, frustration, grief. I am a small p poet, but what I write gives me, big S, satisfaction.
Beef, a poem written and read by Kate Bowler.
Beef, a dead creature in my mouth, sitting snug on the grooves of my tongue, nestled in places I did not know exist. Me, eating what was once a cow, now a butchered slice of flesh, sizzled on all manner of tools, perhaps glazed, marinated, drizzled, with some absurdly spiced exotic flavor. The other lack of clarity I felt, while forcing my teeth to clamp tight, to release and proceed with this action was simply not right. I knew I must continue. This is good for you, they told me, full of protein, iron, and vitamins. And I know, this is not a lie. What I heard true, and what they said with sincerity. Still, there is horror and there is dread. I must chew, I must swallow, I must smile, and perhaps ask for more. This, I am sorry, I cannot do.
Nothing Here, a story written and read by Sarah Marie White.
Nothing here. You emerge from a tunnel. You cover your face, expecting to hit a light. Instead, there's nothing. It doesn't hurt anymore, though. Not as much as it used to. Everything is dark, as it always is. No light, except for that of your flickering lantern. No hope, except for the urge to survive. The room is quite large, and you can't see any walls, which is to be expected. Is there even anyone here? Did they all lose themselves in the darkness? Did they turn back? Did their lanterns hit the ground? Are you the only survivor? When was the last time you saw your family? Where were they? Did they even exist to begin with? Did they care that you were gone? Ghosts from the past circle your head, trapping you as you move forward into endless darkness. It seems like other people have passed through. There are fallen lanterns scattered about, and perhaps people near them. You can count at least 20 now. 20 lanterns. You don't care to think about what that number means. It's just a number, after all. Right? You find a seemingly safe place to sleep, in case people came to deliver another massacre. You'll be safe. Or, in case people come at all. People aren't safe to be around. You lay your head flat on the cold black floor, and vaguely remember doing something similar before this all happened. You would stare into the bright speckled sky, as if it was an art piece you were patiently trying to understand. And there were other colors there. So many colors. The greens of the trees and the orange of the flowers may have been muted then, but you never questioned that when morning came, the colors would come alive. Now, it doesn't matter what time it is. Black is the only thing visible. So the only thing there is to do is walk and desperately hope against all logic that things can get better. So eventually, you'd reach the end of the tunnel, even when you'd already given up hope of that a long time ago. It's only your fear of death that keeps you going now. Death, the fallen lanterns. How many had you seen in the last week? 200? 1,000? Each one of them was a person who didn't deserve to die, whose story would never be told. Some of the lanterns were picked up by grieving families, but as far as you can tell, there's no family out there for you. No one who would even care for a second that you were... You sit up, finding it hard to breathe. You can't calm your pounding heart. Can't get enough air in to think about anything except how long it's been since you've seen your family. How long since you watched the fading sky as it shifted from sunset to night and took in the feelings that made you feel. How long since you twirled and spun and danced out of nothing but joy. How long since you wrote a story, or drew a comic, or read a new book, or thought about any of your passions. When was the last time you didn't take all of that for granted? When was the last time you acknowledged the silence closing in on you, instead of walking forward, completely numb to everything but yourself, or cared about anyone but yourself? You turn over. It doesn't help. You're still staring into emptiness. Nothingness. There's nothing here for you. Nothing here for anyone. Nothing here at all. You close your eyes and force yourself to sleep, knowing that tomorrow will be nothing but the same, if not worse. You walk and sleep, over and over again, out of nothing but fear. People will come and go. People will try to take control. But as far as you know, things will always be bad. And you'll always be alone. How long have you been living like this? 1 year? 2? How much longer will you have to endure this? You remember once hoping, when you were younger, that you would get dreams when you slept, so that you wouldn't be alone with your thoughts. You silently hope for that now, if only for a second, just so that you can have some peace of mind. You wake to echoing footballs and bright lights glowing, blocking out the people's faces, if they truly are people anymore. You push to join the crowd, feeling stern looks on your back. These are certainly people. Still, they let you walk with them, and sleep with them, and walk, and sleep, and walk, and sleep. Months of this fly by. If you're honest with yourself, this doesn't feel much different than when you were alone. One day, you hear humming behind you. A joyous voice. A child, perhaps? Or one of the rare few that hasn't given up yet. Foolish of them, really. If you do anything out of the ordinary here, you may as well already be dead. You feel air rush past you, and hear the voice crying out as things are snatched from them and everything they had is torn away. There snickers and laughs at the poor person. You keep walking until you hear a small clink against the black. Their lantern fell. Silence. Do these people fathom what they've done? You suppose you're not any better. You could have at least tried to stop it, even if you knew that your voice would have been drowned out by the silence. How many other lives could you have saved like that? Against yourself, you look back. They lay there, desperately trying to reach their lantern. Lily? Mia? Lucas? Where are you? I need help. I can't get up. Come on, don't joke around. We gotta get to our new home. I want to go home, guys. I'll be good. I promise. Just don't leave me here. Don't leave me behind. Please. You start to shake. You feel the lights behind you getting dimmer, but you can't move. You've gone numb. And then they look at you, Their eyes are screaming. You move forward and look at them, but you don't see them, and you don't see yourself in the reflecting floor. You see a person you once knew, who shares your name and features, the person you used to be. They're smiling, and happy, and hopeful. They're long gone now, but you stare at them still. They're helping everyone they can off the floor, smiling and joking around. You see it in their eyes that they don't care who these people are. They don't care what mistakes those people have made or the number they'll make in the future. They just want everyone to be alive and happy. And then that person you once knew starts to pound through your skull, their voice shaking your body, and you realize that they aren't gone, just locked away. You locked them away. In exchange for what? You look at your hands, and before you can process what you're doing, you help them off the floor. They cling to you, trembling. You let them, and walk forward. Weeks go by. The small thing is so scared. Its age is indistinguishable, almost like it's an imaginary concept. But the fear that resonates through them is real. They won't go anywhere near the other people, so you've gotten very far behind. You can tell they want something, need something to feel better, but you don't have anything to give. Until one day, you crack a joke. And all of a sudden, the whimpering you've been hearing for weeks stops. And then they laugh. And you laugh. Until you're both laughing to the point where your mouths hurt from smiling. It was a stupid joke. A common one. A joke anyone could have made. But somehow, the tunnels don't feel as dark anymore. And you don't feel so alone. Perhaps all that everyone needs is the knowledge that it's still possible to be happy. Perhaps all that everyone needs is a bit of hope. Suddenly, something new is added to your routine. You still walk. You still sleep. Often, you'll find something to eat. But now, jokes seep through every single crack in the walls and fill up your days. And slowly, people start to join you in your walk. You don't care where they came from, just that they're here and they haven't left. Until one day, you see a light at the end of the tunnel. You walk forward for days. You're more excited than you've ever been, and so happy that your heart might explode. Finally, freedom is within reach. You exit the tunnel and it was a light. A stage light, perhaps. An illusion, set there as some sort of cruel joke. You can't think about what sort of twisted, heartless person set this here. You can't think about everyone else's disappointment. All you can think is that you're never getting out. All the jokes and the happiness and the hope seep out of you, and you're not sure if you'll ever get it back. You hit the ground and sob. People go silent, and they start to walk away. They leave you, like everything else. Each sob hurts more and more. You haven't shown emotions in so long that it doesn't even feel good to release it. It just hurts, and it won't stop hurting. It's too much. And suddenly, your lantern falls from your hands, and your world goes dark. Without your lantern, you won't see, and you'll lose your way. And then there will just be nothing. You feel a hand on your shoulder. It's the small person. They didn't walk away. They look out at your lantern. It's broken, more than you can fix. Still, they reach for it and pick it up and tell you that you'll both find someone to fix it. Then they reach down and offer their lantern to you. You hesitate. Then they shove it into your arms and guide you out of that tunnel. When you reach the main area again, there are people waiting for you. You look out at them, and without saying anything, you choose a different tunnel. You look at your feet, until you hear people talking. You look up and realize they're all smiling and laughing and joking with you. So in turn, you smile and laugh with them. You grasp their hands, and you all carry each other and move forward. You didn't choose to be stuck here, but you have hope that there's a way out, and hope that you can find it. And even if you can't find an exit, perhaps just finding people who care is the way out. Finding people who won't walk away and who want to help you find a way out is how you find the way out. Perhaps all everyone needs is to joke around and laugh with people they choose to get out. Perhaps all anyone needs to get out is a little bit of hope.
When Cats Got Loud, a story by Anne L. Dubois, read by Danielle Henrici.
When I was 16, my summer vacation plans involved getting a job at one of my hometown's well-paying factories. Fortunately, after several failed attempts, I was finally hired by Lily Tulip, a paper cup making factory that was within a 4-mile walking distance from my home. Home was in College Point, Queens, a then small, blue-collar community located on a peninsula that jutted out into Flushing Bay across from LaGuardia Airport. When I applied at the factory, I had envisioned myself working 8 to 4 in a comfortable, air-conditioned office. As part of the company's hiring practice, they gave me an aptitude test which revealed my talent for working with machines. A gift I inherited from my mother, who was a whiz at repairing machines, which she did for free for our neighbors and relatives. As a result, I was put to work on one of the largest 3-story noisy black iron machines in a room that was usually over 100 humid degrees, with free salt tablet dispenser machines every 15 feet or so, along with multiple water dispensers. I learned quickly that the use of these items were necessary if you didn't want to pass out. The good news was that it was a union job, which made my salary exceptionally good, despite it being a summer job. I badly needed the money for expenses at college the coming fall. The hours also turned out to be more to my liking in that they were from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., which gave me time to join my non-working friends at our local beach. I usually left for work at about 5:15 a.m. to make sure I was on time to relieve the night shift and punch the time clock to prevent getting my pay docked. One morning, with the moon still visible and the sun just rising, I could just about see with the hazy glow of the streetlights down through the row of elms that formed a beautiful high arch over the full length of the road. It had rained earlier, leaving the road and grass shiny wet. While I was enjoying the fresh-smelling, cool morning, my attention was drawn by what looked like a sizable black mound at the side of the road in a puddle up against the sidewalk concrete ledge. Cautiously, I slowed down as I got about 10 feet from what I then discovered was a large black cat. It was pretty apparent that earlier he had been hit by a car and was probably dead. The road was a very quiet one. My sister and I used to spend hot summer evenings sitting on the front porch wondering when a car would pass. Recently, hot rods had been appearing with James Dean and Marlon Brando wannabes drag racing. This poor cat probably got surprised by one of those souped-up junkers. As I was standing there, trying not to be too upset, I became aware of movement on the other side of the road. Gradually and very quietly, I saw emerging from between hedges and other plants, at first several adult cats, and then groupings of cats with their kittens. Most were black and white like the deceased cat. All of them, in a very paced, deliberate walk, went to the dead cat. The feeling they were conveying was one of deep concern. As they arrived, it seemed apparent to me this was a family member of theirs who was lying on the road. The first cats to arrive nudged and pushed him. They kept this up for several minutes. With no response, they then roughly tugged at him. Still, sadly, no response occurred. I had hoped against hope that he wasn't dead and that their efforts to revive him would be successful. After each effort, they would all go about touching each other. I could see there was about 12 or more in the group, maybe even more. Some of the kittens were very small. As time went on, they gradually formed a circle around the confirmed dead cat, who I came to think of as their family member, with each cat facing inward. At this point, they began howling loudly. It was a sound akin to a baby wailing. As they got increasingly louder, it also became apparent, moving and not like anything I had ever experienced. It made me shiver, and I also felt deeply sad. But I needed to get to work, and I couldn't bear any longer how upset I was feeling. So I tiptoed across a neighbor's lawn in order not to disturb them in their obvious state of grief. I felt I had just witnessed a sacred ceremony. I was late for work that day, but I didn't care. All day I thought about what I had witnessed, and it made me very anxious to go back to the scene. When I got there, I was surprised to see the dead cat was no longer there. What was left was a large blood stain where he had been. From that stain were drag marks that stopped and started in a path going across the road. They went all the way behind the houses and into the woods that had at one time been orchards. My hope was, and continues to be, that his family had taken him home. I didn't share my experience with anyone for fear everyone would think I was nuts. Also, the night shift workers I was late relieving, I'm sure, didn't want to hear it. It all seemed unbelievable to me. I felt like Captain Kirk on Star Trek, finding an alien culture and doing my best to follow the mandate of not disturbing it. Consequently, I did some research on cats at the library, no Googling in those days, and found out that I was observing a pride of cats. A pride of cats usually consisted of an alpha male and a dominant female, along with several other adult females and kittens of various ages, which I had observed. The dead cat, I'm convinced, was their alpha cat. I looked for those cats every morning that summer and never saw them again. I've also never looked at any cat again the way I had before. I now know they are sentient beings, and it is thought by many that they have their own culture. This experience I was so fortunate to have had made me realize we live on a planet with many different life forms all around us that are different from our own, but also like our own in many ways, if we just look and listen.
The Accident, written and read by E.J. Evans.
The Accident. When we said our tense goodbyes in the kitchen, and I went out into the morning, it was into a strange purity, like a child's dream of winter, a vision of wild gentleness. Air thick with falling snow and silence. The yard new and unrecognizable, the hard tangle of bushes and vines newly made into soft and graceful forms, and the road a carpet of pure white stretching far down the hill. But on starting down, my truck's brakes locked, and I was taken by gravity, slow at first, the truck sliding and sliding all the way down, gathering speed, taking on energy, descending a smooth, graceful arc, with me having become unexpectedly a passenger. All right, so I'm being taken, I thought, strangely calm. I believe in the God of Earth, the final arbiter, who wields gravity, moves all and treats all equally. So show me what you've got then. How far am I being taken? How far does it go? Not the first time I've tried to converse with nature. At the bottom of the hill, the truck swung round in a spiral and slid sideways into a ditch. Dead stopped in silence among trees. I climbed out into the same gentle snowfall, turned, and walked the road back up the hill toward the small, warm house and the woman in it and our small, troubled life together, but paused halfway up and looked out across the white fields and hills as far as I could, and even saw my own self seeing it all, standing there, a tiny nondescript thing, but starkly alert, breathing, reaching out into the silence, to feel for the inevitable direction of my life.
The Door, a story written and performed by Jessica Flood.
Wading through grass gone to seed, I pressed my palm against my pants pocket. The soft jingling stopped. I'd keep the key safe on my way to the old chicken coop. It no longer housed chickens. My parents used it to get away from their kids. I wasn't allowed inside. My small hands on the low end of the coop's angled roof, I leaned forward and swung my legs, one at a time, over top of the wavy, rusty tin. Only a few scratches kissed my thighs. I stood, surveying the land, our old barn that settled and groaned and shifted a bit more to the east each year, the neighboring farmers' lots, with a tall tree centered in each crop field, swaths of pine, birch, spruce, and sugar maple. As I scanned, I hoped for an anomaly to appear. Patterns repeated in the space around me. Certainly somewhere, a path hid in overgrowth, a secret entrance decorated in fern and ivy, a portal to another world, an opportunity to exist elsewhere, a door to escape through. The youngest of 4 children, I did my best to avoid my parents' proximity and drug-fueled violence. I'd roam the rural land for hours searching for the door, entire days hidden in the woods of the Adirondacks, dense with trees, the ground obscured by plant growth. Miles of shale riverbed hiked and explored. As the season's heat waned, I'd open milkweed pods and pile downy fibers at my feet. Lifting a few seeded strands at a time, I'd release them to the wind. Wishes floated from the tips of my fingers. I would dream of summer until she returned. Forced to spend time indoors during the harsh winter, I devoured books during long nights locked in my childhood bedroom. Praying for moonlight sufficient to read by, I hoped to continue long after the house fell silent. I'd reread stories of hidden doors and alternate worlds. I'd discover characters capable of selfless and cruel behavior, motivated by fear and pain, facing insurmountable obstacles and overcoming. They were worthy of another chance. I wanted to be worthy of chances. I wanted my parents to want to be worthy, do the right thing, tell me they loved me, and then act like it. School was a safe place until teachers no longer perceived my childhood behavior as endearing, interpreting me instead as intolerable. Hello, Earth to Jessica! My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Gideson, stomped her foot and huffed. Why can't you pay attention? You are far too intelligent to act so dumb. Head in the clouds all the time, making annoying noises. What is wrong with you? I'd hear those words again and again. What's wrong with you? So much so that what's wrong would be translated by my brain as what's wrong with you? Mrs. Gideson didn't know that I loved my head in the clouds. Escaping into a dream world in my mind was a habit, a reflex, a pleasure, until it wasn't anymore. 12 might be young to leave home for good, but we were leaving with my mom and a promise of a new life free from addiction and abuse. I believed her. I allowed myself to feel excitement for the first time in years, sitting amongst black garbage bags filled with my belongings, On our way to my grandmother's home, the old car's broken exhaust growling beneath us. A few hours later, my mother would leave me and my sister behind. My father would quietly arrive and retrieve her in the secret of night. Something shifted. In my grandmother's home, I felt safe enough to reflect. An opportunity was granted to decipher my past. Removed from the threats around me, the threats within me emerged. Nightmares, sleep disturbances, and depression appeared. Long, dark tendrils of putrid vines crept up around me. The harder I fought to escape the past, the more it felt inevitable. I needed a new habit. My mind wasn't cooperating as an escape any longer. I demonized my parents' substance abuse. Their drinking and drug use was grotesque. The violence that came from overindulgence was horrifying. And then I tried it myself. That first drink was euphoric, skin tingling, mind buzzing, life altering pleasure. I was 13. I didn't want to become a teenage drunken mess, to feel as worthless as I'd felt growing up. But comfort in my skin was a new experience. Even if comfort was temporary and the end result of my drinking repeatedly proved obnoxious and dangerous, I'd keep seeking out the sense of comfort and ease I felt with each first drink. Self-inflicted punishment is a hard habit to break when you believe you deserve it. I pondered if escaping where I grew up, where I'd hurt and been hurt, was the answer to what plagued me. I moved from Graham's house the day after I graduated high school. I felt safe again, but never safe enough to get close in relationships. It's hard for people to hurt you when you refuse to let anyone in. Perhaps working nonstop would help me forget, or college and work, or graduate school and field placements and work simultaneously. I wanted to forget why life felt so hard, why I still wanted to drink even though I was okay, why I couldn't stop seeing the trauma of my past in my daily life. Then I met my future husband. I felt safe. I trusted him. This made me want to drink more. We got engaged, married, and had our first son. I wasn't done punishing myself. Flashbacks and nightmares consumed me. I'd left that place decades earlier, and yet it came to find me now. I couldn't hide. Unless I drank to oblivion. Blackout drunk meant no dreams. Addiction has the power to consume all of the light and hand you back death and destruction. I believed I needed alcohol to survive. My body pleaded for more. I wanted to want to stop. I didn't know how to live a life without it. It's hard to be ready for recovery with a brain that isn't capable of making good, healthy decisions. When wishes and prayers weren't enough to keep me going any longer, and all I loved was slipping away, I sought out and accepted treatment. A few years into alcohol abstinence, I'd changed a narcolepsy medication. On the advice of my psychiatrist, I began a stimulant often prescribed for ADHD. Suddenly, the voices in my head that wouldn't stop quieted. I stopped forgetting that I didn't drink alcohol anymore. Sobriety is tricky with a brain that forgets multiple times a day that you have a problem with alcohol. I stopped craving substances. I had access to my vocabulary. Words that had evaded me appeared again. I began writing and reading books. I had space in my brain for creating stories. Soon, I'd seek out and be diagnosed with autism. I'd discover why I felt so foreign. I've accepted that I'm different. My lens has shifted. I don't perceive the world differently because of trauma, but because of how my brain is wired. I'm not constantly reminded of my abusers. They no longer hold power over me. I am who and how I am because of who and how I was born. I was born with gifts. I was born with struggles. My brain is neurodivergent. I no longer look to elude the pain of my reality. Instead, I revisit characters resembling those I've been hurt by, like those I hurt, to find my younger self and grant her grace. I imagine characters that are flawed and mysterious and powerful. I relish my 3 boys' requests to tell them a story. Mommy, tell me again, where did the big key come from? The one on the wall in the hallway. You mean the one I stole from sleeping guards in the woods? Yes, Mommy, that one. Completely immersed, losing sense of time and place, my boys intently focus on my words. I lead them to the secret door, to another world. Together, we go through.